Hi, my name is Barbara Romero, and as part of the exhibition How to Be a Guerrilla Girl, me and my colleague Luana Medina Fortes created resources for us and for the community and the educational community especially to actually work with data from the Getty. Let me start sharing part of my screen in which I will show you how everything works. So, first, we will work with data from ULAN. You might don't know what is ULAN or you are familiar with ULAN. You would have the links down in the video, but also on the websites, in which you can see that is the union list of artist name. This is a control vocabulary created by the Getty that allow us to find information about artists. It's also widely used and a reference for the community in art history or cultural heritage or cultural studies. Here you can find information of every single artist that you want to find information of. Let's try the sculpture, the Spanish sculpture, La Roldana. So you will write here the name, and then you can decide which one is the person that you are looking for. Here, in this information, you would have names, as you see here, that is other names that they have been used to refer the same person, which is extremely useful when there is many different names in different languages, because sometimes we kind of translate names. We will have nationalities, so we can see what are these persons from, roles, gender, and then where and when was born and died. Interesting too is that ULAN also work as a relational concept, which makes so much sense and is super useful because you can see who other people this person relate to. As we grow the vocabulary, we will have more connections. In this case, we have sibling by marriage in law, and it's Tomás de los Arcos. Interesting too that you can see different biographies and connected to other vocabularies and other resources, like for example, the free collection. So ULAN has many different artists and people collected in this database. The interesting part would be being able to analyze all these records without having us to go one by one manually as we did right now. And this is what we are showing you today. So if we go to the download center, we can find different ways of download the whole information of this control vocabulary. And then we can try to utilize that. There is many different ways of doing that. One of the simplest one is going to the vocabulary that you want to do. In this case would be ULAN, that is data, dictionaries, and simple records. So as you see here, the full published dataset contains almost 400,000 records. So in this way, you can decide to download a sample data, but also the schema. And then you can choose XML or UTF-8, a relational table. So the resources that me and Luana created for this exhibition focused mainly on creating things that the people can use. And in this way, we created different files that they are in XLXX. One is about personal metadata. To know what is the information that is inside these datasets, we also created documents to access that information. In these documents, we explain what is each one of the columns and what you expect to find there. This is extremely useful because if you're not familiar with what is the information inside, at least you have here a hint of what you can find. So this one is one of the first data sets, and it is useful because it has the subject ID that it connects to the person. So that would be the person ID. Then you have the name, you would have birthplace, you would have birth date. Then you also have gender. You also have biography text, because some of them has few lines of biography that maybe could be useful if you want to explore what is the information there or to know more about any of the persons that you decide. Then we have the role. So if we want artists, designers, photographers, architects, so we can actually filter them using role. And last but not least, nationality. This is the role database. This is as ULAN has it. This has not been cleaned up by us or structured by us. We took few of the different variables that it's part of ULAN and we made it in another file that everyone can understand. We also will provide this one in CSV in case that we want to explore a different way of understanding this file. But you have to take into consideration that there is things that they have not been cleaned. For example, the fact that there is a lot of undetermined nationalities. It is also interesting to see the different granularities within the roles, such as, for example, we have designer, but there is also this garden designer, and there is also an artist and a graphic artist. Depending on your research question or how you want to explore this information, you would need to clean this information and this data. The other thing that we created, the other dataset, it's about relations. So if one has more biographical records, this one has relations. So for that, we will have person ID, then person name, then gender, relationship type, related person ID, then we have person name, gender 2, and relation category. We wrote few notes here for you to take into consideration when you make this exploration, but exactly the same. We created two different files. One that is an Excel file you can open in Google Drive, and we also put it in CSV. So as you see here, the information is not related to biographies, but more related to this type of relations. This is interesting because here you see person ID and related person ID will correspond with what we saw before. That is this one here that is called subject ID. In this case, it is exactly the same number. So you can find all these people in your other spreadsheet, and you can also cross-reference them if you feel like doing something more complex with your data skills. If not, here you have all the information related to person name, gender, relation type, related person. So the interesting part is that you can actually know who was related to who. But through here, we can see information like what are the type of relationships that we record of women, are personal or professional? How many women are connected to other women in a professional way? How many men are connected to women in a professional way? What type of relationship is that? With this simple 7 columns, we can actually explore gender relations in a very binary way. So that's another part of the dataset. And last but not least, imagine that you are in a more advanced way and you don't want to use these datasets that we selected few variables. You want to be able to select your own dataset or make questions to the whole thing without having two different files. For that, we created Jupyter Notebook. If you're not familiar with Jupyter Notebook, it is a more human-friendly way of seeing coding, especially Python. So instead of working on the terminal, you would be working in what we call a notebook. That is this interface that allows us to actually make comments and add textual information to our code. For that, you can download our Jupyter Notebook here. If you don't have Jupyter Notebook, which is free, no worries. You can also use Visual Studio Code. And if you don't have Visual Studio Code, the next option would be to use Google Colab, which is free and is online, so you don't have to download absolutely anything. So this is Jupyter Notebook. As I said before, I'm using Visual Studio Code. This helps as a human-friendly interface to actually share code for especially Python. In this case, it's extremely useful because we can add text. And in this case, we can put information within a cell with text, but also we can make comments within the code. So I can guide through and explain you which every row does. So you can make sense of what is happening. So here we have exploring ULAN data. We add the two links, and then you have to go to download and download this type of file. Once you have it in your computer, go to preparing data. For that, you only have to click, and then you will have all the information here of the code. The interesting part is what I said before. They have comments. And in this case, Here you can place folder to XML file, so the folder where you download all the information. Obviously, here I make a comment that they said change this for your folder root. So we will have to find what is your folder root and add it here. The rest of the information gives you, for example, preferred terms. So what we are doing here is to put all the different files that you download from ULAN together and then decided to create a dataset. What is the information within all this data that we are going to select? Here, for example, I selected preferred bio, birthplace, birth date, death date, sex, and bio text. From roles, I also selected preferred role ID in case that they have one, and then nationality. Here you have how it would ending up looking like in your new CSV. But this is not enough. We want to go further. And in this case, we create a data cleaning moment. For example, you see here that the role has also a number, but we don't want that number. We want just the name. So for that, we decided to split all of this and clean it. Here is how our dataset looks like right now, which is more human-friendly. If we continue, we also want to check the name of the last name. So for example, here, the name and last name is first last name, then the name. So if we want to make it more name, first name and then last name, then we can also do that. Here is a way of inverting the name and the last name from the column name. This is not mandatory. This is small things that you can do to make it more human-friendly. Then that would be the results. And then we can see how that changed here. If we are happy with the results that we have, we can save it. If not, we can continue adding new cells here and make it more as we wish. If we want to create an XLX, then we only have to save it into an Excel format, but also we can do that in a CSV. This would be the way of putting these almost 400,000 records within one dataset and select few variables. If we continue and we want to explore a bit further, like, do a small analysis, then we created 3 different variables that we can look at based on what we selected: nationalities, gender. So if we go to nationalities, we created 2 sections, list of nationalities and the top 10 nationalities. Imagine that we want to see what are the list of unique nationalities. And here we have all of the ones that appears. This is interesting because we can check also how the granularity changed having North Netherlandish, but it's complex too because then we also have Netherlandish. So there is many things that we will have to take into consideration for when analyzing the nationalities within this dataset, and things that we might have to normalize and explore further, depending on our research question, of course. If we want to see what are the top 10 nationalities, so what are the ones that appears the most, then here we have a simple graph, and then we selected color. We also created this, that you can add information and colors, and I think that is very nice. And then we have top 10 nationalities in which we can see what is the most popular nationality within the artist recorded. You remember that this is not properly clean and that will need more normalization before we have an accurate number here. But this gives you the code and the interest of how simple analysis can help and contribute to make sense of the data. We are not asking big research questions. We are asking mainly what is there and what can be done. Then, if we continue, we can see the top 10 nationalities by gender. So what we did here is that we filter for male and female because there is many of them that they have no gender or they have other words. Then we have by nationality, top 10 nationalities by gender. So we see that American, they are mostly men than women. However, in the Dutch, the proportion of women is not as bad as compared with the rest. So that is also something that we can look up and something that is interesting. The same thing with role. If we want to check the different roles, we can see that artist is the one that has more people, but also the one that has more men. Last but not least, if we close the section of gender, then we have role. And from role, we can see what are the top 10 roles. So this is it. You can run that by yourself when you download the information, and you only have to press enter and run it. Or you can change this dataset, this notebook, and create your own dataset and follow the instructions to continue exploring this data. It is interesting that there is many challenges that we have to overcome, not only, for example, in different way of genders to the dataset, which is extremely interesting. But also, it would be also extremely interesting to see what other variables are you coming from, what are your research questions, how many of research questions can be solved with a very simple data set about lives and about relations. And this is the interesting part. This is just a small section of how we can explore a very long and interesting path that ULAN can bring us. And as I said before, this part of the exhibition, How to Be a Guerrilla Girl. Go see the exhibition, but also explore by yourself and contest data sets and information that is out there. Museums are a great place for having these critical discussions, and research institutes are always open to find ways of exploring and criticize and understand what are the mechanisms and the logics behind everything that is happening in the world and has been happening. So we are giving you the keys to explore further resources that they are open and downloadable and for everyone. You just need to go and explore. So thank you.